This is Vernier for cardowners.com, and this is the 8th and final episode of Season 1 of Crushing the Micros. So I have a pre-recorded session of 45 minutes of play at 4 tables of 25 NL. There's going to be a couple of PowerPoint presentations where I go into a little bit more depth and talk about the thoughts behind my decisions, but for now, let's just go right to the tables. Alright, so we pick up the action with me having ace-5 offsuit in the small blind. While I prefer to stay tied in the small blind, heads up versus somebody who I have no reads on. I think I'm going to be raising this pretty much almost always until I get a reason not to raise it. If I know that the villain is going to be either a bully type or or drunk or just a very loose player, then ace-5 it's not going to have good equity versus his range. So I'm just going to get floated a lot, and it's a hand that I'm going to pass up. I'll probably raise hands like ace-9 and up. Now, on the other hand, here I'm going to be raising this almost always against Limper because for one, I'm going to be in position, and I'm going to be able to take it down pre-flop very often. And the times that I don't take it down pre-flop, then I'm going to very often be able to take it down post-flop. So the problem with having like a ace rag in the small blind, big blind is it just does not have much equity post-flop. And you are going to be out of position, and against somebody who likes to float you and call with any two cards in position, it's just going to be difficult to play and probably going to be a losing play for you. So one of the things that I want to talk about in addition to, I guess, just talking about my hands is, as we pick up aces on table 4, is active learning versus passive learning. So making a video is it's a pretty difficult process for a couple of reasons. Well, let me talk about this hand first. So versus on a very dry board like this, I'm just going to be playing my aces very aggressively. Somebody who's played every single hand in their first 5 hands is going to be peeling with a lot of cards, and they're going to be raising with all kinds of draws and all kinds of goofy hands. So when I bet and he insta-folds, it means that he already had the check fold button clicked on, and it makes me think that he's very much a level 1 type player. And this is going to be reaffirmed on this flop, where he cold calls out of position, and the flop comes King Jack 2, all clubs, and he check min raises a player that just 3-bet him. So yeah, so a player that's going to be playing very level 1 type poker, it's just going to be easy to play against this kind of a player. So but going back to the active versus passive learning, I think I think a huge benefit for a lot of players would be to actually make a video like this and to go back and to analyze your own video. So here with the 2s against a player, I'm deep with everybody who's in the pot, and it's going to be 25 cents to play. I think there's no other play than calling and just trying to play for set value. And when you go back, so I think I misplayed a couple of hands in this video, and I think this is one of them. So on table 4, I've got pocket 5s, and this Julian Hopk just stacked this player earlier who was in feeder spot, and now he's raising on the button, or he's raising on the cutoff, and I've got pocket 5s, and we're 100 BPs deep. So against a very aggressive and seemingly loose player, or against a player that's opening a lot, even over short sample size, this is usually going to be a 3-better fold. But in this case, I choose to fold it. But I think with the very touristy, very loose type of player still being in the big blind, I think by calling, I encourage this guy to come along and I can play a multi-way pot with a small pocket pair, which I'm happy to do. I could also squeeze there, but my first gut was just to fold, but I think I prefer calling and keeping this guy in and just giving him better odds to call, and I actually don't hate a squeeze. Um, or just not a squeeze, but a 3-bet. But I think actually I think my favorite option would be just flat calling, keeping this guy in, then folding, and then maybe 3-betting. But going back to this idea of making your own video, um, I think it would be really beneficial for anybody here to do this. So make a video of you playing either 4 tables or 2 tables or whatever your normal game is, and then go back and then just take some notes on the video. So for example, here's the notes that I took while I was making this video, and just gives me an idea of kind of what my thought process was during the different hands and such. And then find somebody who is either at about your skill level and or a little bit better than you, and have them critique your video. So have them go through and then write the same kind of notes that you wrote, and then you both go through the video and figure out what you agree on and what you disagree on. And I think just the conversation, when you're watching your own video, that in and of itself is going to be educational. So you will notice things that you wish you could have done, or you wish you would have done, or hands that you would have played differently. So for example, with the pocket fives there, I see that I probably should have called there. And when you do this, you will be able to, you're definitely going to grow a lot more as a player. So watching videos is certainly good because it gives you an idea of, it either reinforces things that you're already doing, or it gives you alternate ways of thinking about things. So down here on table 4, without a read, I basically have like second pair to the board, but I'm going to be betting this, and there's not a lot of draws on there. I'm definitely going to be getting value out of a lot of hands, like pocket 9s, pocket 8s, pocket 7s. Any kind of 10 is not going to be folding. So I think there's definitely a lot of merit for betting there, but once, if he calls, I'm going to proceed with caution. If he raises me, it's just a really crappy spot, because I just don't think he's going to do that with a 10, and there's just not enough draws to justify doing so. So here, this player on table 3 posted out of position, this LFCP23. So I popped the 9s up, and he called, and the Smolgan player called as well. And the flop brings 3 overcards. This is not a flop that I would be continuation betting, and it's just a flop that I'm going to be check folding. So Mulligan leads into both of us, which makes my decision even easier. I think this is a flop that he could successfully lead with a lot of different hands. His most likely hands here are going to be 1 pair plus gutter type hands like Queen Jack, King Queen, Ace Jack, Ace King. Although I would expect him to 3-bet Ace King. It's just such a great spot for him to be 3-betting Ace King because of this guy posting out of position, and I think especially being this deep. But he leads into us. If I had any piece of this, if I had any kind of like pair plus gutter type hand myself, I would definitely be calling at least ones just because I'm in position and he's given me such a good price. But with pocket 9s, I have no equity in the pot pretty much, so I'm just going to end up folding. But leading is something that I definitely want to talk a lot about in Season 2 because there's a lot of there's a lot of pots that you can pick up by leading, and he does show the king, the ace king, which I'm surprised he didn't three bet. Given his stats, he's playing 60-20, 1.8, and he's three betting 20% of the hands. Yeah, it's a small sample size, but it's definitely it's just definitely a standard spot for him to be three betting, and he should be doing so. So, up here on table 2, I pick up 10-8 offsuit, which I would normally be folding, but if you notice how tight the table is playing, the button's playing 7-7, the small blind is playing 8-8 over 15 and 12 hands, and over 5 hands the big blind has not played a hand yet. So I'm definitely going to open up my range. If the table stays this tight, then I'm just going to be leaving it because it's not going to be a profitable table for me. On table 1, I have pocket aces, and I'm going to be playing this pretty aggressively as well. There's a lot of draws on here. So 7-8, any kind of clubs. I think any kind of 9, any kind of 8, any kind of 7 is going to be peeling me, so I'm going to be playing this aggressively. So I bet $2 into 255. I think if I'm raised, I'm still going to be playing it for stacks, just because I don't think, I just don't think these players could really represent much that has me crushed on this board. Alright, so, yeah, so going back to what I was saying about this active learning, I think making a video and then going back and critiquing your own plays, is just going to be beneficial to whoever does it. And I think the process of actually doing so, you realize that it's a lot harder to justify some of your plays than you might have thought, and then you start thinking deeper about why am I doing what I'm doing, and this kind of reflection is just very necessary for growth. So here's kind of mistake number 2, or it's not a big mistake up on table 2, but I think I talked to some friends about this, and I'll explain what my thought initially was, and then what we kind of agreed upon when this thing finished. So my initial thought was I have no read on the player. Now we're very deep, and we're close to 200 big blinds deep. So I think that alone merits for calling, and I think well, that and the fact that I have position. So I've got position, we're 200 big blinds deep. I have really no read on the player, and I think a lot of times he's going to have big cards, and he's just not going to. I think most players at this limit are not going to double barrel me. So this deep, I think it should be a call. I think if you're 100 and I think we decided that 170 big blinds and between 130 and 170 big blinds. A lot of it depends on game flows, so since I have no specific reads on this player, probably just be folding it. And less than 130 big blinds deep, unless the player's a complete nit, then I should probably be folding it. But given how deep we are, I definitely think it's a call. But I just ended up folding there just because fives really don't play that well post flop. Unless you hit a set or you have a read, specific read on the player. Here 10-7, I'm going to be raising it until I have a reason not to raise it. So over 14 hands, while this player is playing loose, he has not 3-bet yet. This number down here, which just changed to 20%, is my 3-bet average. And so I'm gonna be raising the button, but now that he's shown that he's gonna be 3-betting me out of the blinds, I'm just gonna take it easy. All right. So now on table 4, we come up with a situation where I'm 3-betting light this vegan 72 guy. So I want to go into a little bit more detail on why this is going to be a profitable play. Alright, so here are some things to consider when you're going to be 3-betting. So first of all, are you going to have position post-flop? If you are going to be in position post-flop, then you should be a lot more willing to 3-bet somebody than if you're going to be out of position. In this case, we can put a check over here because we are going to have position on this vegan 72 player. Now, the second thing to consider is what is my image at the table and what is the history between us. So we've been at the table for both for 13 hands, and he's playing 15-15 and I'm playing 15-15. So I'm definitely playing pretty tight, so my image is pretty good. And he's also has 100% um, steal percentage, so I know he's going to be opening a lot even though he's playing tight. So he just seems like a pretty tight, solid player after only 13 hands. So given that there's no history between us, then I am a lot more likely to 3-bet him light because people are just going to be more willing to give me credit the first time around. Now, what is my read on the player? And the question is, how often will he fold? So if I'm going to be 3-betting him, I'm going to make it 335. So I am planning to win $1.25 plus 335. So there's going to be 460 in the pot. So if we divide 335 by 460, you come out to 73%. So just to show an immediate profit from the 3-bet, I need him to fold 73% or more. And from my experience with playing these kind of players, then they're going to be folding. They're going to be folding very often to this kind of 3-bet, unless they have a legitimate hand. So even if I am flat called, then I'm going to be positioned, and I'm going to be able to fire on a lot of flops. Any kind of ace high flop, any kind of king high flop, even queen high flops I'm going to be able to fire. And then there's times where I am going to actually flop huge, and I'm going to be able to extract value. And the last thing to consider, and maybe not as much at these limits, well, the one thing you do have to consider at these limit is how often are you going to get cold called? Is your 3-bet going to get cold called by the blinds who have something like a pocket eights and they just don't want to fold, or something like a king queen, or people who even call with ace queen? So the big blind definitely doesn't seem like that kind of a candidate, and the Solorentine, although he's playing a lot of hands, he I don't know. He just didn't strike me as the kind of candidate to cold call a 3-bet. Now, he could definitely, if I was to call here, then he would definitely be calling along and just kind of being the tourist that he is, just wants to play cheap poker. So once we 3-bet, we're just making it too expensive. So, and also at the mid and higher limits, although I don't have much direct experience with the higher limits, but people will see that as kind of an isolation by me, and then they'll like cold 4-bet bluff. But I don't think I have seen that in the micro stakes, but I just haven't seen enough of that. So all these things put together, I think, make this a profitable 3-bet spot. And yeah, I think it's a spot that's going to show an immediate profit. All right, so I do in fact 3-bet him, and he does in fact fold. So if somebody's playing a lot of tables, then you should be a lot more willing to 3-bet him as well. And this actually would have been an okay spot to 3-bet him again, but I think he's opening he's opening in early position. So, but after that he quits pretty quickly. I don't think he sees the table as one that's going to be profitable. Although he does have position on this Julian Hook guy. So, all right, Ace Jack versus a touristy passive type player. It's a hand that I'm definitely ahead of his range, so I'm going to be raising it with the intention of firing on a lot of flops. He's going to be calling with a lot of dominated hands like 10 Jack, King Jack, any kind of ace, and I'm going to be able to fire on a lot of high card boards. So Queen King 5, definitely a board that I want to fire. I do have a lot of equity in the pot, and it's a flop that's a lot more likely to hit my range than it is to hit his. So I'm going to be firing, and I'm going to be trying to, well, I'm just going to be able to take it down more often than not. So um, these kind of, so we've kind of identified this player as kind of a touristy player, and while he does have position on me, which is not optimal, but right now he just seems to be playing kind of a passive tie game. Here with the King 10, this is also definitely a good spot to be 3-betting because the small blind seems very tight, and this Bustikov guy, we're deep, but after 9 hands, he's playing 20 to 11. So while he did 3-bet me when I had those 5 earlier, he just um, it's going to be hard for him to continue. I think if he was the kind of guy that's going to like called 4-bet, he would be playing something like, you know, 60-50 at this point. This player is playing 29-21. Again, it's a small sample size, but he's going to be stealing. He's stealing 50% of the time, so he's going to be out of position, and it's just going to be difficult for him to continue. So, uh, so while I am 3-betting this as kind of a bluff, um, being in position, it's going to make all the difference in the world. So, um, definitely willing to do so a lot more on the button than I am, for example, in the cutoff. But here, I would be willing to do that in the cutoff too, because the player that's directly on my left is playing 7-4 after 27 hands, and is just not, doesn't seem like a player that's going to be playing back at me a lot. So basically, I'm going to consider a lot of my cutoffs to be like a second button for me. All right, so let me move forward to kind of the next interesting hand. So up on table, I fast forward about 40 seconds. Um, Up on table 3, I pick up pocket aces, and I have one flag caller, and now I'm squeezed. I'm squeezed by a player who's playing 40-25 and is 3-betting 17% of the time. And we're also pretty deep, which makes this to me, it makes it a mandatory 4-bet. So now it's just a matter of what kind of size I want to make it, and players like that hate to fold, but I want to make it. I think if I make it too much, he's just going to be a lot more willing to fold. Um, Now the flop is 4-5-6, very dry. It's a flop that I'm definitely going to be felting, even when we're this deep, just because I think he'll go with so many draws. And if he flopped a set, he flopped a set. There's so many draws that he could have that I'm ahead of, and even if he flops something like 2-pair, I have a lot of equity versus that as well. So now I want to bet an amount which is going to induce him to kind of spaz out and freak out or something. So I bet a little bit less than half the pot, which would give him just enough room to still shove over me, but he folds right off the bat, and this ends up being kind of a theme in a lot of these. Uh, uh, Let me think. I guess in a lot of my play recently, this has been kind of a theme that people they'll call 4-bets and then they'll just like fold the flop, which to me is weird. Like if you're going to be calling with some kind of a pocket pair, like you can't call for set value. Um, so I'll make a note on him. 25-0, called 4-bet out of position, check folded 1/2 pot size bet on a 4-5-6 diamond flop. And although I have a green color for him, I'm going to change it to red as he fits the description of a bully. Here on table 2, just standard raise on the button. and now a player who's playing 13-10 three bets me. Against this player, I would definitely be calling with any kind of pocket pair here, and a lot of suited connectors, but Queen 8 suited is just a little bit too high to profitably play against this player. Um, Now, this whimsy guy raises the button again. I have ace 9 suited. We're pretty deep, and I think versus his raising range, um, I just think I'm so far ahead. So I don't like I don't like folding because I do think he's going to overplay his hand, and I hate three betting because I know he's not going to be folding to a three bet. It's going to make my life miserable on a lot of flops. So I'm just going to flat call. I don't think folding is horrible, but I'm so far ahead of his range that I really hate folding, and part of that just comes from having played quite a bit of heads up, and versus this kind of a player, I would just never fold ace 9 suited heads up. So that's going through my mind as I'm playing that hand. Um, I am going to proceed with caution, but I just expect him to um, overplay whatever hand he has, and I'm going to be able to take it down more often than not. Like if I hit anything, um, I think he's going to be value betting worse, and I think that if I flop something like two pair or a flush, or end up with a flush, then I'm going to be there's going to be a lot of profit there. Up on table two, there's really no target at this table. So the Heya is playing he's playing very nitty, and the Museg is kind of a card owner's type, and then we have a Nit up here that's playing 4-4, and another Nit that's playing 10-3, and another Nit that's playing 17-6. So when I look around this table, up on table two, I have no idea where my money's gonna come from. So if I'm in a situation where I don't know where my money's coming from, there are so many other tables at the micro stakes that I just owe it to myself to leave. So that's what I'm gonna do. I finish out my blinds and I'm just gonna head out. Standard raise on table one with pocket queens. I'm gonna be playing it aggressively. If I'm re-raised, I'm probably gonna 4-bet. And on table four, I've got a short stack who limps into my blinds, and I actually didn't notice at the time that it was a short stack. But when somebody limps and I'm out of position, and 4-10 suited actually plays pretty well post flop, I am going to raise it up, and more often than not, I'm going to take it down. And now I actually flopped a huge hand, so I'm definitely playing it for stacks now. But he folds. Um, when somebody limps like that, and I have a hand that so 10-4 suited plays pretty well. I think any kind of uh, maybe not any kind of a lot of suited connectors. A hand would have to be really crappy for me to not raise it, as I just think it's going to show a profit. But here, this 9-8 offsuit versus this tourist guy that's going to be calling a lot and is going to have position on me, it's just going to play very poorly. So I'm going to let it go and not think twice about it. Alright, I'm going to fast forward for about a minute and get to another interesting spot. Or more. Right now, there's just a lot of fooling going on. Okay, so this Mulligan guy limps on the button, and I have ace 3. My kicker sucks here. There's really no draws, but I think by betting, there's I'm not going to get much value out of his range. So if he has an ace, he's going to continue and probably has me beat. He might call with a 9, but I don't think I'm going to get 3 streets of value. So my plan is to check and just let him bet, and I'm going to check call. Now I turn to pair, so now with all the draws out there, I'm definitely going to be betting again. And hope that he calls me with whatever he has. Basically, by checking the flop, I give him a chance to improve on the turn. On the river, I have a full house, so I'm just gonna bet again, and I have no idea what he has, but I hope he calls me with something. Um, I think checking just he doesn't seem like the kind of he doesn't seem like a bluffy player. Um, he's playing a lot of hands, but he's playing them pretty straightforward. As we saw earlier, I mean he didn't even three bet ace king out of the blinds. Here I'm just gonna be folding 7-4 to kind of go along with my theme of staying tight versus a loose players when it's small blind, big blind. So let me fast forward a little bit more to our next situation. So this is a very similar situation to the one earlier where I had the 10-4 suited, and this time I had 8-4 of spades. And I'm going to raise the guy up because I think he's going to fold a lot pre-flop. But I actually have a pair. I've got second pair, so I'm going to be playing. I'm going to be betting it for value. I think he might call me with ace high here. He might call me with overcards. I'm more than happy to take it down. So I'm doing it part for value and part to protect my hand. If he called with something, with just a 4 out there, there's just a lot of uh, cards that he could turn to where he actually gets a pair. So I do want to protect my hand, and I'm more than happy taking it down. And if I improve, then I can exercise some pot control. So here is a pretty interesting hand where I raise pocket tens, and a lot of this is just going to be read based. So this guy, after only 7 hands, he's already playing 43-43. So he's playing pretty wild. So I think this is a flop that this player is going to be making a lot of moves on, and I do bet it for value. There's a lot of draws out there, and he raises me. So now we have to think about what he's doing this with and think about what our best line versus what he's doing this with. So I'm going to pause the video and go into a little bit more details on that. So when I'm in this kind of situation where I'm raised and I have a pretty marginal hand for this. Well, it's a good hand, but definitely nothing close to the nuts, and especially having an underpair to the board. Some of the things to consider. First of all, what's my read on the villain? And this guy's playing 43-43, so even after only 7 hands, he's involved in a lot of pots. So this strikes me as the kind of bully type guy who's going to be just trying to trying to take pots away with aggression and trying to make people fold hands. So with my experience with players like this, I think they're going to be playing any kind of pair aggressively here. They're going to be playing any kind of draw aggressively, and they're going to be playing air aggressively. So what is he raising with? He's definitely raising with, I would say, any kind of flush draw, any kind of straight draw, which I guess you can have something like, the most obvious one is 4-5, but he could definitely be doing it with a gutter, like 7-4, 7-5. He could be doing this with any kind of pair, definitely a queen, although I think if he had more showdown value, he would be looking to flat call. So if he has a hand like Queen Jack, he'd probably be looking to flat call because he would see that as having more value. He wouldn't have this immediate need to push me out of the pot, which raising does. So given all that, I put a lot of marginal made hands and a lot of draws in his range. So now the question is, what's my best line versus that range? I think if I 3-bet it and get it in, I think it might fold out a lot of like 6s or 3s, just hands that don't stand a lot of heat. And he's definitely he might even fold a draw. So, but I think 3-betting here doesn't really accomplish that much. I am going to be out of position for the rest of the hand, which is definitely a factor to consider. But my plan is just to check raise a lot of safe turns. I would say any kind of non-spade turn is going to be safe. Um, so yeah, so that's my plan, and let's go back to the hand. All right, so we're back with the hand, and I do in fact end up flat calling. So the turn is an 8, which is a very good card for me, as no straight draws or flush draws get there. So now I think that if he bets a respectable amount, close to 2/3 pot. But at this point, I'm just going to go with my read, and with all the draws that he might have, I'm just going to check raise all in. The equity that the draws have also drops dramatically on the turn. But he tanks for a while, which makes me think that he doesn't have a queen. I think this kind of a player is snap calling me with a queen. Um, so he thinks about it for a bit and ends up calling me. So he had the second pair on the flop. Uh, Obviously, I don't like the way he played, but um, uh, I'm happy that I have his money. So down here on table 3, I actually end up I call it flat called pre-flop versus this guy, and I actually end up betting the river because I think he might look me up with ace high. So um, on table 4, I have pocket sixes. Um, Versus a player, this Julian Hop guy, he's raising an early position, and I've got a pretty loose player in the blinds with pocket sixes. It's just going to be a easy call on the button. Just play position. I think three betting is bad. It pushes the um, pushes the big blind out and kind of turns my hand into a bluff, especially against a reasonable player who's raising an early position. But now, once they both check to me, I think that I'm going to have the best hand almost always. So now I'm going to bet to protect my hand. I think if I'm not worried at all about Julian Hop. I think if he had um, if you would have, yeah, I think he bets this flop with a huge range of hands. So once he checks, I think he has something like ace king, ace jack, maybe ace 10, and he's not looking to continue. He might even have a hand like fives or fours. So basically, there's a lot of overcards. He could even have a hand like 9, 10. With both of these players in the pot, there's just so many overcards that can come to where I have to worry about, I'm essentially facing a 12 outer combined if they both have overcards to me. So I'm going to bet my hand to protect since neither of them has shown interest in the pot, and probably just give up if Hulk or Hoang D does anything. But I think the merits of trying to protect my hand, which I'm almost positive is good, outweigh the um, I guess the chance that I'm going to get raised off my hand, or that somebody's going to have a better hand than me. So let me go back and just I do end up leaving this table. Um, I've got two nits directly on my right and another kind of nit, and this player Savant Child, who seems like pretty reasonable player, but again, I don't have any fish, or I can't really see any fish. So when that's the case, then I'm going to be leaving and trying to find a better spot. All right, so 3-6 versus a nit who's not even a full stack. I'm just going to be folding. So as you're playing, it's be looking for juicy tables and start getting on wait lists. And Alright, so versus a player who's playing 14-12, I think raising almost any two cards, of course 7-2s, I mean it's absolute garbage, but um, unless they're 3-betting you, and a player who's playing 14-2 is just going to be playing very straightforward, and even if they call you pre-flop, you're going to be able to take it away, or you're going to be able to continuation bet a lot of flops which have high cards, and sometimes you might even hit, and you'll actually be value betting. But this is a flop that I'm definitely going to be betting because um, I just expect him to be folding a lot on this flop if he misses. But once he does, I'm just going to give up. Um, so yeah, a player who's playing like 14-12 has just a VPIP of under 15. They're just going to be playing a lot of fit or fold poker. Um, Here, the 10-9 suited, I would be a lot more likely to raise if these players were tight behind me, but both, I'm going to be out of position potentially against a player who's 35-6 kind of touristy guy and a 43-29 kind of a bully type, and just 10-9 suited is going to be garbage against them when uh, the tourist is often going to be calling, and the bully, although he hasn't 3-bet yet, I just expect him to be 3-betting there quite a bit. So that's my general plan. All right. On table 3, we have a limper in early position. So King 10 high Broadway cards are definitely going to be in my range of isolating him. And we have a full ray flop, which I completely missed. So with all the draws out there, I don't expect my c-bet to ever be profitable there. Once it's checked around and the 10 comes, if it's checked to me, I think it's a mandatory bet, as I can get called by a lot of worse 10s, and with all the draws out there, I can expect to get called by a draw too. So my plan is to bet here, fold if there's any kind of pressure, and unless I hit a 10 or 4 on the river, I'm just going to check it down in position. I don't think there's going to be much value in betting um, because people are most likely going to have a draw, and I could get value owned by. I definitely can't send a check raise. I just don't think they're going to be calling me enough. So the guy had ace queen of spades. He had 2 overs and a flush draw on the turn. Just ended up playing it pretty passively. I think it would have been a good spot for him to 3-bet pre-flop, but he didn't. So I also ended up leaving table number 1. It had no clear target for me as well. So, alright, so I guess let me talk about my targets at these tables. Here on table 4, it's actually not a very good table for me right now as well. If the direction of the game was reversed, then it would be a great table for me. But it's right now it's not a very good table. On table number 3, my target is actually setting out this mulligan guy that I was deep with, mulligan guy, and everybody else seems pretty decent. So I'm actually going to be leaving this table pretty soon too. Table 1, I've got this Eram guy who's playing. Well, I don't have any reads on him, but I am in position against a position against a bully, so I'm pretty happy about that. And on table 2, I just sat there, so I'm gonna wait for the dynamics to shape up a little bit before I make my decision whether I want to stay or leave that table. But yeah, but like I said, this is something that you should be doing all the time. So this Julian Hop guy definitely has very good and very reasonable numbers. He's 3-betting a pretty high percentage of his cards, his hands right now, but that's just it's probably a small sample size. Uh, Against his under the gun raise, calling pocket eights, especially with the loose players behind me, is definitely the way to go. Now we get a huge squeeze out of Hoang D, and Dueling Hop folds, and I'm just gonna dump my fives or dump my eights. I don't think they're gonna really show a profit. And he's yet to 3-bet, so I'm gonna give him respect. Here, blind on blind, 5-7 suited. I'm gonna be raising versus an unknown, and this is a flop that I'm gonna be able to take it down a good percentage of the time, and I actually have some equity with my gutter. So if I turn it, I'm gonna be in good shape. Here, I'm isolating on table one, Jack 10 suited, isolating the limper who's played 3 out of his last 4 hands. All right. Let me see. All right, let me move a little bit forward to the next kind of interesting hand. All right, so here's the next interesting hand up on table one. Fast forwarded about a minute. Out of position, I'm going to squeeze with kings quite substantially. And down here on table 3, versus a player who's playing 14-14, I don't quite want to 3-bet my king queen and turn it into a bluff, because if I'm 4-bet, um, I just can't do anything against this player. Um, but I definitely don't. I definitely want to just flat call in position and see a flop. By flat calling, he could be raising King Jack, King 10, Queen Jack. He could be raising a lot of dominated hands. So I think against his range, I have a lot of value there. Once this player who's playing 24-0 and has never 3-bet over 34 hands squeezes, my hand just becomes garbage, and I just end up folding it. Up here, back to table 1 with pocket kings, both players call, and one's playing very nitty, 14-0, and the other is playing 43-0. So if I had players that were more aggressive here, I would check this sometimes to represent ace-king, but without a read, I'm just going to bet this, and I'm gonna bet it kind of small just to induce action. I think that I'm ahead far enough to where um, I'm gonna be able to get all the money in post flop anyhow if I want to. But they both fold, so these like little half pot bets seem to be doing the trick. Which is something to consider when you actually have a hand like Ace King there, is or you know Ace King in a 4-bet pot or 3-bet pot, just um, betting kind of small, and people seem to play pretty straightforward. Here, I'm just gonna bet my straight for value. I've got the dummy end of a straight. Obviously, any kind of 8 beats me, but who knows what he'll look me up with. Um, he ends up calling. I think he had ace 5. I think he rivered a 5. And I don't know, just I take it down. Here versus short stacked 6-7 suited is just going to be garbage. If I had probably 8s or higher, I would 3-bet and get it in. Ace Jack and higher, probably 3-bet and get it in. Given his stack size, but a lot of like pseudo connectors are just going to play very poorly versus this range. Now, 1 second, I'm going to go for just a few more hands. Alright, so there's 2 hands going on right now. On table 1, I am raising 7-8 suited because I've got a player that I think is going to be playing a lot of hands in the big blind, and I also decide to limp behind this 6-7 suited. Um, I think this guy is just short enough and just aggressive enough to where I don't want to be isolating with this kind of a hand, but I do want to play it. So I end up limping behind because I think I'm going to have position more often than not. And if I hit the flop, I'm going to hit it hard. Um, and here I just bet my 7-8 suited just to protect it and for value. And it's a king high flop on table one. It was, so it's just a good spot to do it. Here no one's shown interest in the pot, and I turn a open-ended straight draw. So I want to bet it because there's a good chance that I can take the pot down, and in addition to that, if I actually hit my straight, then I want the pot to be a little bit bigger so I can bet more. Once I turn a6, there's really no reason to bet. I think he peels me on the hand. I just don't think I'll ever get called by worse there. So, and also don't think it's a good spot to bluff, as the pot is small, and people just want to look you up in smaller pots. All right, and on table one, we're gonna have, or we do have, ace 10 suited, which this Eram guy, he's got 22-15, and he's playing 28-0. I'm really far ahead of his range, so I'm going to be raising here and expect to get called by a wide range, and I'm going to be able to take it away on the flop. So the flop gives me a, I guess, second pair top kicker, and now he min raises me on this flop. So it's it's kind of an interesting decision on what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and just talk about my thought process in this hand and what I did. So I actually jumped ahead to the turn, but basically what happened on the flop is there's $2.55 in the pot, and I bet $2 because I expect him to play. I just expect him to call with a lot of worse hands, but he ends up min raising me. He ends up min raising me to $4, which set off some alarms in my head, as even though only after 13 hands, the player is just playing really, really, really passively. So once he min raises, there's definitely a lot of draws in his range. He could certainly be doing that with a queen. He could certainly be doing it with a worse 10. But he could also be doing it with a flush draw. He could be doing it with a straight draw. So I do end up peeling a card and check into him on the turn, and he ends up potting. So now I've got to go through my decision thought process. And so first of all, what is my read on the villain, and what do I know about his range? This kind of a player, I think, is going to he might raise his draws on the flop, but I think he's going to play them quite passively on the turn. So how would he play a monster hand? I think a monster hand, he um, obviously if he had a full house, I don't think he would pot it. I think he would try to milk me. I think even with a queen, he might try to milk me, unless he's one of those players that's just like so afraid of all the draws out there. He just wants to get all the money in now while he's ahead. I think if he had a draw, he would often check behind here and try to get his draw in position on the turn. So once he pots it, it doesn't make sense. Again, he could be the kind of player that just spazzes out and pots it because he doesn't know what else to do in this situation. And what about a marginal may hand? This is the kind of player that might limp the button with kings and jacks, and then play him pretty aggressively. So I think he could have a worse 10. He might pot it with a worse 10, but um, it's just a weird situation where he ends up betting $11 and he has $6 behind. So I definitely don't think there's any kind of fold equity, and I think without a read, you can really go either way. You can shove here, and nobody would blame you, and you can fold, and I don't think a lot of people would blame you either. I've talked to some other players about this hand, and um, what a lot of them said is if you're planning on um, calling, then you should probably go with the hand on a safe turn. But his bet sizing just really threw me off. So uh, I would be interested to know what he had. I think you can definitely shove here and be okay, and end up seeing a hand like pocket nines, which they turn into a bluff for king 10 or jack 10. You might end up seeing a hand like queen 9, at which point you just shrug your hand. You can also see a hand like jacks and kings, and I actually think that those kind of hands are much more likely um, than a hand like queen or a draw. You could see a draw here, which he just chooses to play aggressively, and against the draw, I have about 80% equity. So yeah, either way, it's just goofy bet size on the turn, and I guess that reinforces one of those things that you there's it's just a very gray area. All right, so we'll see this hand played out. Down here on table four, I raise pocket nines in early position and get flat called by the big blind, and I'm just gonna fire away for value on the 2-2 king flop. I think he might peel me with. I mean, it's just he's just gonna be folding so much, um, and yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get much action even if I check behind. So yeah, this is one of those goofy situations where I don't know. I mean, you can go either way, but I end up folding here. Just it's kind of what my gut was telling me at the time. Here I raised 5-6 suited because this player's not raising me a lot and he's folding a decent amount. And I flopped bottom two. I'm going to play this aggressively, and I'm gonna play it for stacks. So I just bet out, but he folds. Here it's a lumped pot with pocket fours. Not gonna raise it up. I'm happy just seeing a flop. And I raise from out of position my ace king suited on table four. It gets folded around. Or the person limped the button. I raise ace king suited and it's folded. So with my fours, I'm just hoping to flop a set. If I flop a set, I'm gonna go with it, and if I don't, and I actually would have rivered. This guy rivered two pair with queen four, and I would have had a set of fours. And this guy actually had two pair on the flop, so or on the turn. All right. All right. So here we go. Up on table one, we have this Yamchi guy who's playing pretty loose and very aggressively call in or raise under the gun. I could squeeze here, but with all the people behind me and this kind of loose passive short stack, or not a short stack, this kind of loose passive 47-0 player, I just called in a position with my Broadway cards. You can make a case for folding. I think squeezing is a little bit too. I just don't think squeezing is very good here. So I just call in position, hope to get a multi-way pot. This Sun Cesario guy re-raises huge, and he does so with Ace King, and flops a monster with flush draw and top pair, top kicker, and takes both of these guys out. So the very next hand, I pick up Ace King myself and raise it up. Um, it's kind of a funny hand because he makes it. How much does he make it? He makes it $9, and I I think I'm either good here or I'm flipping. But I actually think he's gonna have a pretty goofy hand like um, ace queen here. Often he might have tens or jacks and he's just kind of riding his the wave of his success. So Ace king suited, I just put the rest in, and he calls me pretty quickly with queens, and we're off to the races. And I get a glorious flush draw and two overcard flop. So I'm feeling pretty good about my hand right now. But I break out and he stacks me. So, given the way he's playing, just ace king is the nuts there. Um, it's just funny that he squeezed to $9. To me, it just seemed that much weaker when he did that. So I was happy to get it all in with ace king there. Here with jacks, on table 2, I'm very deep against Yamchi, and this asim is, I think he's just ready to go all in with whatever garbage he might have. The interesting thing about this hand is, at the same time, I'm going to be involved on table 2 with Yamchi as well, and I was also involved in a pretty big hand up on table 1 where Yamchi is on my table with ace king. So, well, when you're playing against regulars, you'll often have a bunch of things happening at once, and they're definitely going to have an impact on one another. So up here he folds, which I'm surprised. I guess he might have just had absolute garbage because we're so deep that he should be calling me with a pretty wide range. Um, on the other hand, when he does that, then Asim could shove, and it just puts everybody in kind of a bad situation. But down here on table 3, he 3-bets me. So given my read of he just got stacked on this table, I just 3-bet him, and he had to fold on table 2. This is going to be a mandatory 4-bet for me. I think he'll call me with a lot worse. I'm going to make it kind of small, and still give him room to shove over me. So I make it a little bit more than 2x, and he flat calls. It's a pretty good flop for me. Again, if he's flat calling with a, I think he's going to be flat calling me with hands like 8s through jacks that just don't want to get it all in pre-flop. So against hands like that, I'm actually going to, I decided to just shove because I think pocket pairs are going to be such a big part of his range that I also think he's going to be a good thinking player. Even though he's kind of the bully type, I think I can actually show weakness by shoving, by having him out level himself and say, well, you know, if he actually had a legitimate hand, he would never shove here. So I do end up shoving, but unfortunately, we were not on the same level, and he ends up folding. I had no idea what he had. Maybe he's a card runners member, and he can tell me what he had in that hand. If that's the case, you know, why in the world is he flat calling my 4-bets out of position? And if he puts me on ace king, which I might have, or some kind of garbage, then he must have just completely missed the flop to be doing so. Just to be folding. Alright, let me fast forward about 30 seconds. Alright, so here we are with our friend Iram again, who's really short at this point. I debate raising it in, but I think Queen Jack is just a little bit too bad of a hand to do so with. I flop a gutter and 2 overs and just choose to min bet. I don't really care if I'm called or not, but I think I'm going to be able to take it down more often than not. So, as an alternative to checking, I think that's vital. Something Vital Myth said is, you know, min betting is the alternative of to checking, but you might actually get somebody to fold. So I min bet the turn again, and he folds pretty quickly. So I have no idea. I have no idea what he had. I mean, he must have just had. I don't even know. I have no good read on Iram. Given all the dynamics, this is not a good spot to squeeze with King 10. I think more often than not, I would get it all in with Iram here because he would flag call me. or he would just come over the top and stick the rest of this money in. So stack sizes are not good for that, and the dynamics between me and Yamchi are not good for that either. So yeah, so um, unless he has massive tilt issues, then I think his style is going to be it's gonna be okay once he definitely once he moves up limits. If he has tilt issues, then he's gonna spew a lot, but a pretty aggressive style, uh, could definitely be profitable at these limits, especially if you're able to table select well and pick on other players. All right, here with on table two with king queen suited, I've got this limper who is playing 17-4, so um, very tight, very passive, has an aggression factor of 1. And then this Savio 78, who's playing 32-11, raises very small to isolate. And we've got Brown Sugar Boobs, who flat calls, and I'm sitting with King Queen suited. Um, I think I can. I mean, I can consider all my options here. I could definitely squeeze, but I think I'm a little bit too deep with Sabio and Brown Sugar Boobs to play this hand profitably if I squeeze. Um, I could flat call, but then I'm going to have a hand out of position, which is likely to be dominated. I think if I had a hand like any kind of pseudo connector below 10 jack suited, I'm definitely flat calling here, as I think I will have a multi-way pot. But these cards are just a little bit too high um, to be able to play profitably. So I think I go through all my options and just decide to fold. Mostly because I'm going to be out of position, and mostly because I have cards which are likely to be dominated by Ace King and Ace Queen. So I think if you would have called there, I don't think anybody would say that's a huge mistake. I think if you would have three bet, I actually think a three bet is kind of the worst of the options. Down here on table four, I think this is another good spot to three bet, kind of three betting as a bluff, and I think this Bob Knight is gonna be folding often enough to make it profitable. And in addition to that, I think if I flat call, then Huang Li might squeeze. So by three betting myself, I don't allow him to squeeze as easily. And yeah, I just think it's going to show an immediate profit. And if Bob Knight flat calls, then I have a hand that plays pretty well post flop, in pretty well post flop in position. And especially given my image, I'm playing 14-11 in this table, and he's playing 16-16. So I'm on the button. It's going to be a good spot for me to. It's going to be a good spot for me to three bet there. So yeah, when you're in this situation, like you should ask yourself, am I doing it as a bluff, or am I doing it for value? And I think in this case, I'm just doing it because the situation is a good three betting situation. So my hand doesn't make too much of a difference there. On table three, I pick up pocket tens versus a 4-2 guy. I'm going to be playing these pretty much for set value. I'll probably even play jacks for set value here because, well, I guess tens or jacks. If it's heads up and it's a dry flop, I will call once. But against a 4-2 guy, just I think you'd be okay playing them for set value. Once he bets strongly on a 3-5-6 connected flop, I think he's going to have an overpair with a diamond there almost always. And I don't think there's another way to play that hand. Here in position, I given the way Ace-M has been playing, I decide to isolate him with Ace-7 offsuit. That's probably the bottom of the range that I would be isolating him with. On this kind of a flop, I think I'm going to get shoved on often enough, and it's just not going to be a good flop for me to continue. So I was hoping to take it away on the flop, and when when I'm unable to do so, or um, take it away pre-flop. And yeah, when he calls and I get this kind of a flop, I just don't think it's going to be profitable for me to continue. All right, so I'm going to play one more hand and call it a video. So let me go on to that hand. Yeah, here we go. This I get ace king offsuit. Definitely going to be raising it. It's kind of too bad that ace-sim didn't come along, but I'm called by this tourist type player in the big blind or on the button, and he's playing 31-13. Hasn't three bet much on this kind of a flop. I think he's going to be peeling or raising pretty much 100% of his range. So ace king is just has very little equity, and it's just a spot where, given as deep as we are and given the board texture, I'm just going to be check folding. So yeah, so that's it. That's some live play at 25 no limit. When we come back for season 2 of Crushing the Micros, we're gonna focus a lot more on post flop situations, and we're gonna look at them in groups of um, um, yeah, just groups of categories, like what kind of situations dictate you know, leading flops heads up. Definitely focus on continuation betting. Definitely focus on pot control on the turn, charging draws, things like that. So a lot of flop play, a lot of turn play, a lot of river play. Playing in three red pots is definitely something we're going to focus on as well. But for the time being, if you get a chance to make your video, like I talked about at the beginning, and watch it with, first of all, go through and make your own notes on the video. And then have a study buddy do the same, and then just talk about the different situations. And I think you'll find it to be a very eye-opening experience about your own play, and the other person is definitely going to learn a lot too. So it's a win-win situation. But for now, closing out season 1 of Crushing the Micros, this is Vernier for Card Runners, and good luck at the table, guys.